Hello, Gay and KATHLYN HENDRiCKS, aka KATiE HENDRiCKS. Welcome so much. It's such an honor, a huge privilege, and a joy to have you here with us today. How are you doing?
Thank you.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Yes. So everybody, I'm going to read to you in Gay and KATHLYN's first person words because nothing conveys it like their own mouths and their own hearts. A little bit about their relationship and their lives, and then we'll go into just, my goodness, they are just the most glorious, well-informed, living laboratory beings on the planet. So everyone is on a journey to love. Here's a peek inside the love Gay and KATiE share in their words. Our meeting and connecting happened across a crowded room, really, in January of 1980. We recognized each other first at an energetic/spiritual level and have been thrilled and curious to learn more ever since. From our first conversation, we've been passionate about relationship as a path of awakening. We committed and recommitted each step of the way to our first intention. We create a relationship that runs primarily on positive energy. Woo! We employ magic moves that continue to guide our daily choices. The conscious relationship map we've co-created contains processes and practices that can enliven and harmonize your close relationships as it did ours. We'd love to live in a world where people celebrate each other as equal partners, spending most of our time in expressing genius and supporting creativity. We invite you to join us in the adventure of a lifetime, conscious loving. For almost 40 years, we've loved, lived, and learned together. We're our own best customers for the practices you'll find here. Our relationship is a living laboratory for conscious loving, and we've personally tested everything you'll find here, in the bedroom, over breakfast, and in the boardroom. We've written more than 40 books, trained thousands of coaches, appeared on Oprah, and hosted seminars around the globe. We've broken through the muck of limiting beliefs and explored the boundless creativity, intimacy, and ease on the other side. We're committed to helping others expand their capacity to give and receive love. We've seen people begin the journey of a lifetime in just a moment of conscious choice. And although we've witnessed thousands of transformations, we're still deeply moved by each one. We want to help create a world of deep intimacy, satisfying creativity, heartfelt appreciation, and wild play. In that spirit, here's our take on each other, a glimpse into how we relate. We hope you enjoy. There is a beautiful write-up that we have, but I wonder if y'all can just speak a few loving words of celebration, modeling some of your signature skills about each other.
Well, I would say that Gay is the most extraordinary visionary. And that what I also really appreciate about you is that you're impeccable about your integrity and have been from the moment I met you, and it makes you so count-onable, you know, as a person who's fully present and fully participating.
I once, 41 years ago is when I first met KATiE. And so here we are 41 years later, and I still think she's the most gorgeous woman I've ever seen in my life. And in the first moment I saw her, she just looked to me like she exuded love. And now I know for sure 41 years later that it's absolutely true every moment of every day.
It's so tremendous. Oh my goodness. Would y'all tell us a little bit about your first encounter?
Yes.
Yes. I was both a professor and getting my PhD at a small graduate school in California, and Gay came to teach for a weekend, and he was looking around the room. There were a circle of people, and he came past me and then came back, and we had this infinite moment of what I would call recognition, where we really saw each other, and it opened up a door, a portal that we are still exploring, the possibilities of being completely real with each other, of being able to celebrate each other's genius. And so I, at a break, went up to ask him a question. And I started to open my mouth to ask a question. I can't remember what the question was to this day, because he said,
I said, actually, let me go back a month, because I just had an epiphany where I realized in this one moment, a month before I met KATiE, I had a realization of how I messed up every relationship I'd ever been in. It was like a bolt of enlightenment. I'm amazed, a little bit ashamed. It took me till I was 34 years old, but I finally woke up one day and realized I mess up every relationship by doing two things wrong. One is I don't talk about my feelings. I don't say anything that's real in there. I kind of present a false front. So that's one thing. Because I'd had many, many women since I was a teenager say, you never tell me anything about your feelings or anything. And I would always say, oh gosh, that's just girl stuff, would you please lay off? And, but I realized that in every relationship, I'd always messed it up by lying basically about what was going on in me. The second way I messed up relationships was by blaming. If I got criticized, I would criticize back. Or if I criticized the other person, then they'd criticize me back. And we get into this blame game, and nobody ever took any responsibility for what was going on. And so I had this epiphany, and I then rolled the clock forward to when KATiE came up and asked me that question. I said to her, I am very attracted to you.
That's what made my question leave my brain.
So there I was being honest for once in my life about how I was feeling. So I said, I'm very attracted to you, and I'd love to ask you out for a cup of coffee. However, I want to let you know that I just had this epiphany a month ago where I realized how I messed up relationships by not being honest and by blaming and getting involved in blame back and forth. And so I've made a commitment to only be in relationships where both people are honest and both people are committed to taking responsibility for the stuff that comes up rather than blaming each other. And I've added a third one, which I realize I mess up relationships by trading the intimacy in for my own creativity, getting lost in the drama of the relationship and having that eat up all my creative energy. So on those terms, would you like to have a cup of coffee with me?
So here's what I said. I considered this for about 15 seconds because here's what I heard. I don't care what you're doing. I'd like you to drop everything and come with me to Colorado and enter into this journey of what we later called conscious loving with me. So what do you think? And so I said, how about lunch?
Awesome.
She took it to the next level.
I'll do that and raise you one.
Exactly.
Yeah, and we've been having that same magical conversation every day for 41 years now, and it just keeps getting better and better and better.
Gosh. So I've heard that, KATiE, you were at a place in your life where you weren't necessarily feeling completely on top of your game, and maybe, a lot of, there are so many myths that surround where you have to be within yourself in order to have a healthy relationship. And I think we put our focus on the wrong things instead of focusing on what actually needs qualitatively to be there. But I just want to point out to everybody who's feeling like maybe their lives aren't at their finest or whatever. KATiE was at a point where she didn't have that much money, or things like that, and still this beautiful kismet portal to co-creative forevers, like to source and divine with and through each other, opened up right there. What do you think it was that within y'all, had you in your previous relationships, had you been really self-aware and conscious, or did you have relationships where you were really kind of in the dark? And what was the process of kind of awakening for you?
Yes. Well, I think every relationship, if you choose, is an opportunity for learning. And we now say that every relationship interaction is an opportunity to expand, to learn something, to open up to some new aspect of yourself or some new way of seeing yourself or your partner or your possibilities together. And I think that it leads to one of the biggest problems for people in relationship is that they'd rather be right or all well organized before they venture into opening up to the possibility of relating to another person. And so I really think that it was our willingness, it was my willingness to, what I realized now was that I was taking a big leap. That was my first big leap, which is that I just said, I want this. This is something my whole self wanted. And there were a whole bunch of obstacles I mean, really a whole bunch of obstacles. And I just kept going, this is what I'm choosing. And I kept recommitting to that. And the thrill of the adventure, of learning together, of discovering, has been so thrilling. It's been really the most thrilling. It's not even so much that we love each other, because we do, but that we're kind of hang gliding together over these new vistas. And I just find that more thrilling than I thought possible in life.
Yeah, and a lot of it does have to do with openness to learning, because a lot of the things that jam up relationships is one person decides to be right, and then the other person decides to be right.
Decides to be righter, and then off you go.
Yeah, and so we always say that all arguments between couples are a race to occupy the victim position, where one person gets to feeling like they're the victim and puts the perpetrator role on the other person, but then the other person doesn't say,
no, I'm not the villain, you're the villain. I'm the one who's been wronged here. And that's the source of so many dramas in relationship.
Actually, we've actually had couples come in the door here that had been doing that drama for 20 or 30 years and had never figured out a way to get out of that particular interlock. And so it's a great pleasure, because we're all the time able to see couples break through that, and individuals break through that and have an actual experience of being alive and intimacy. And so it's a very big joy. I don't know if you remember the psychiatrist, Eric Byrne, founder of transactional analysis. He said one time at the end of his career, most people don't experience 15 minutes of genuine intimacy in their entire lifetimes. And at the time I heard that, I was a young therapist at the time, 40, 50 years ago. I thought, boy, that's a very pessimistic attitude. But now I think it may be an overestimate sometimes, that many people don't get 2 minutes. And because we've had couples in here that had literally been married for 30 years, but had never had an actual connection on an authentic level. They'd been persona to persona for X number of years, but never really connected with each other.
Wow. So I would love to take people on an odyssey from codependency. And I want, let's pretend like I am extremely codependent and in a codependent relationship. And I am coming to, and I don't even know it. I just I don't like my partner. They're always threatening to leave me. This sucks. I need help. So what happens when I roll up? And but inside of myself, I'm like, gosh, I know it can be better than this. My partner doesn't know that, but I do. I want something different than this. My partner is reluctantly coming along. So
yes,
that's very often the case.
Yeah. So what do we do when we roll in and it's just kind of a logjam? Where do we start? How do we start?
Okay, well, usually people don't roll in. One rolls in dragging the other one. And
caveman style.
well, it's an interesting fact of life that there was a scientific study done on who makes the call to the therapist to set up a first session of marital therapy or relationship therapy. 96% of the time in heterosexual relationships, it's the woman that makes the call. 4% of the time, it's us guys that make the call. And so a lot of time, it's getting better now, though. In the early days of our seminars, it was like 3/4 women, 1/4 men. Over the years now,
it's pretty much even.
Pretty much even. And that's a very encouraging sign. But to answer your question specifically, the very first thing that needs to happen in any kind of change process is a commitment to change. A willingness can get you in the door, but it's commitment that actually starts the process. So if you come up rolling in the door with your beloved, or dragging your beloved in the door, or having them drag you in the door, it always ends up the same kind of conversation for the first hour or so, which is, are you committed to making the change? Will you commit to the things that will make this relationship better? Surprisingly enough, some people won't do that. They'd rather be right and have the relationship die than they would actually participate. Because the fact of the matter is, in relationship counseling, a lot of people wait too late to come in the door because they wait until there's such a stack of stuff burdening down the relationship that, boy, it's tough to get through. So hint, everybody, it's like, don't wait until you're crawling across the floor to come in. It's just like, don't wait till you have to visit the ER before you get this thing fixed.
Yes, it's like
I think too, with the, particularly with the pandemic and people getting more support and realizing that everybody needs support from time to time, that some of the stigma has begun to lessen, but there's still this sense of, if you can't handle it in your own home, in the privacy of your own home, not only have you messed up in your relationship, but you should be ashamed that you can't handle it. So that whole tough it out is something I'd really like to have people change, because we don't receive any education. We used to say this a lot, 40 years ago, and it hasn't really changed that much, that people really get an education about what it takes to create a successful relationship. If we had a course on that in high school that was actually where people could learn how to tell the truth, could learn how to take healthy responsibility, could learn how to appreciate themselves and others, it would make a huge difference. So a lot of what we see is that people have a terrible education, and then because they don't know what to do, they blame themselves and think they should. So a lot of it is just letting people know this is how relationship works, is that you don't get to know what you need to learn until you actually get in. And committing gets you into the game, rather than I'm going to wait and see what you do and then maybe I'll do something, that kind of na. So that makes a huge difference for people when they say, and often people will say too, well, tell me, they want a guarantee. Tell me what's going to happen, and then I'll tell you if I want to do it. And it would be like somebody saying, I want to learn how to swim, but I'm not going to get in the pool. I want to just watch pictures of it.
Swim on the land.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, the primacy of commitment, very important thing in individual change as well as relationship change, because I used to be very overweight. I weigh about 180 pounds now, but at one point in my earlier life, when I was 23, 24 years old, I weighed 100 pounds more than I weigh now, more than that, 140 pounds more. And I'd always had trouble with my weight, had glandular screw-ups when I was growing up, and was taken around to different medical experts and everything. But anyway, I finally lost the weight. And the interesting thing was, even though I'd had a bunch of different treatments, it wasn't until one day when I was, I think, 24 years old, where I said, okay, regardless of what the medical people say, I'm going to handle this. Yes. And so I did this remarkable thing. For a year, I ate only food that I'd never eaten before, things like fruits and vegetables. And instead of, at the time, I lived on hot dogs, hamburgers, French fries, milkshakes, that kind of fast food lifestyle. And I looked at, and so I started eating only things that I said fed my spirit rather than fed my old body. And lo and behold, 50 years later, I've been thin now for more of my life than I was fat. And so I think wherever you are in the process of changing something personal or changing something in relationship, don't overlook the power of heartfelt commitment, because that can take you into zones you never even imagined existed.
Yeah.
If people can have 10 seconds of that.
That's it. I want people to develop a vision for what they're hungering for. Like, what is it? What are the fruits and vegetables that are going to light them up in terms of, because I think a lot of people don't commit because they don't know what's available. They're like, God, relationships are such a drag. I just kind of snatch and grab and then I'm out. I may just get what I can and then I just leave and go get a different one. And then I get a little bit.
Trade that one in.
I don't think
people are the Bic lighters of relationship.
So how do you, if somebody is low commitment, how do you awaken their hunger? How do you set a vision for them?
I first want to just say too that it's not just commitment, but what is even more important than commitment is recommitment. Because people think of commitment as a one-time choice. And what we've found is that you make that choice really sometimes on a daily level, on a many times daily, of recommitting. And the question underneath that is, what do you most want?
Mm-hmm.
What do you really want? So when Gay and I first got together, I was, from my growing up and what I saw around me, I was much better at noticing what other people wanted than noticing what I wanted. So early in our relationship, I was sort of like a surgical nurse. I could look over at Gay and I could tell what he wanted, and I could just hand him things because my wanting was focused on him rather than taking ownership of my own wholeness and my own ability to be completely myself in the relationship. So what do you want? And then recommitting to that over and over again, I think is really a very important key for people, because we have this sense of commitment gets interpreted through our perfectionist. I make this one choice, and then if I mess up, it's over.
Right.
So why bother?
Yeah. And we always say too that making a commitment puts you on target, but it's recommitting that gets you there. And the example that we use is the automatic pilot on an aircraft, that if you're in Los Angeles and you want to go to New York, it sets the target as New York, but then it drifts constantly. Every 5 seconds or so, it goes over here, and then it says, okay, let's correct, go back to the left. Okay, let's go back to the right. And so it gets to New York by being wrong most of the time, 99% of the time, because it's willing to learn from itself.
Yeah, and recommit.
Fortunately, they don't have human beings in charge of that process, because after it had drifted off about 3 times, both people would be getting right, and it's your fault.
That's the relationship fail right there, right? Continuing micro adjustments. So what for you was the thing that was lighting y'all up about what was it that got you wanting to commit to relationships? So sure that you wanted relationship as a vehicle for what you were looking for.
Well, gosh.
For me, it had never been done before. I'd never seen it be done before. I'd grown up in a family where, I mean, everything I knew about relationships was stuff I had to unlearn later.
Yeah,
you know,
like
because
women's work.
There was no way to solve problems, and there was a lot of corporal punishment and all those kind of things that, you know, kind of get in the way later. Like, I'll give you one example. It was a big breakthrough one day early in our relationship where I started to criticize KATiE for something. Even though we'd made these commitments to not blame and criticize, we still slipped off and we'd have to recorrect. And I started to criticize her about something. And I realized suddenly, internally, I was feeling anxious and scared rather than angry. You know, if you listened to my voice, you would have thought I'm angry, but down inside, I was scared. And I reported that. I said, you know, I just realized I'm criticizing you in an angry tone, but what I'm realizing down in my belly, I feel scared. What am I scared about? And I kind of thought out loud, and I realized, oh, I'm scared I'm going to lose you. And that moment.
Yeah, that was a big moment.
That was a big moment because it got me, you know, I always say the longest journey is the 12-inch journey from here down to here. And that journey for me, you know, once I was there and had that territory, then I could say, oh, I feel scared about this, or I feel sad about this, or I'm angry about this. But it wasn't a big deal anymore. I could talk about my feelings, but from talking about them from up here is almost impossible because you kind of get your awareness down where they live. That's why at our institute and in our work, we stress a lot of body-centered tools like using your own natural gifts of breathing and movement to solve the same kind of problems that other people try to solve purely cognitively.
Right, right.
I know one of the things that I experienced so early on in our relationship was it was so much more fun than I was having on my own. I have laughed more with Gay than I'd laughed in my whole previous life and many lifetimes, I'm sure. And the idea that being with another person could be an avenue for discovery and sharing and co-creating together and appreciating that I'd never had access to before, because it was all about fear and control and people who basically didn't love themselves and were trying to look for a love out there, but then wouldn't let it in. And so what we learned was that if I expand my capacity to give and receive more love every day, it makes me more available to be co-creating and creating this space between, which I think is the new frontier, is what some people call the we space, but it's the flow of connection and creativity and appreciation. It just makes life so much richer.